You may have seen locals in Barcelona spraying tourists with water guns. You may also have seen that the Barcelona mayor just announced not one tourist more. So if you're considering visiting, this is the video for you. In fact, I've been living here for 2 months and I haven't had one bad experience with locals and the fact that I am not a local. And I'm sure partly that's just a matter of luck, but I think it's also because I have been able to rely on my diplomatic training. And there are a lot of videos out there that are about where to go, what to see, what to pack, how to avoid pickpocketers. And this is not that video, okay? This video is about how you can be a good visitor to Barcelona. So if you're still planning to come, I have 3 very important tips for you from a former diplomat. The biggest gripe that locals have with tourists is that they make Barcelona unlivably expensive. So in order to avoid making this already large problem even worse, you should first of all consider where you're staying. And I would highly recommend not staying in an Airbnb, in part because you won't be able to after 2028. That's what the mayor was talking about. He's ending licenses for Airbnbs. But you can stay in a hotel, you can stay in a hostel, you can stay with someone you know, and if you're really adventurous, you can stay in a tent. I've heard of people doing that as well, as long as it's in a place where you can legally camp, of course. Next in this economic point is that you should try to do tours and excursions with locals. Make sure that you're not kind of giving these tourist dollars that you're planning to spend to a foreigner or to some bigger conglomerate where the money is not going to stay locally. And then the most fun part is the shopping, okay? So highly recommend you shop locally. There's so many great local establishments in terms of food, shops, cafes. Please don't go to Starbucks, or don't only go to Starbucks. And especially because there's so many great gifts that you can bring for yourself or for your loved ones when you come back. Spain and Barcelona area specifically is known for, all sorts of things: espadrilles, olive oil, vermouth, cava, local artisan goods of all kinds, because Barcelona is really a hub for artists. Okay, so the next umbrella of tips that I have for you is culture, because Catalonia, the region where Barcelona is in, has a very strong regional identity. In fact, polls show that the vast majority of Catalans identify as either as much Catalan as they are Spanish or more Catalan than they are Spanish. And there's turmoil between Catalans and Spaniards outside of Catalan who are very patriotic in being Spanish. But definitely be aware that Catalonia has its own flag, which is actually older than the Spanish flag, and its own language, which is related to Spanish but is not Spanish and is actually older than Spanish. So when you're in Catalonia, when you're in Barcelona, you'll see this flag a lot. This is the Catalonian flag. You will also, though, see this flag. This flag is advocating for Catalan independence from Spain. And if it looks vaguely Caribbean, that's because it does take inspiration from Puerto Rico and Cuba and other former Spanish colonies. So what this means for you is, if you get the chance to engage and meet and chit chat with a local, don't assume that they want to be called Spanish, or don't lump them in with other Spaniards. Just make sure that when you're talking about them, you are talking about them in the context of Catalonia, unless they want to talk about being Spanish, in which case, obviously, that's great. So interestingly enough, though, I have heard that despite the fact that Catalans are have a lot of regional pride and they have a lot of pride in their language, that they in Barcelona would often prefer to be greeted in Spanish than in English, if those are kind of the options, right? Obviously, if you know Catalan or you want to learn a few words of Catalan before going, you're probably going to score some major bonus points with locals. But it's not hard to learn a few things, and my top tip for you is to go in and make sure you know, especially if somebody seems Spanish, right? If they are clearly, an American who's working there, obviously don't worry about this, but if they seem like they could be locals from Barcelona, make sure that you greet them even when you're going into a shop. If you're trying to have an interaction with them in general, I would always make sure to say hola buenas. This is kind of a catch-all. I understand you can use it, it's Spanish, but it's also it also can be used in Catalan regions as well, very easily. And then you wait until they respond. I think in other cultures, especially in the American culture, often you will, at least where I'm from, you will like dive in and say, hi, I need this. And in this part of the world, I would say that there's definitely a focus on making sure that you're engaging in a polite and maybe a little more patient conversation where you make sure that they have time to respond before you go into their question. I think that's going to score you a lot of bonus points. So the third kind of group of recommendations I have is about transportation, because another really difficult factor in Barcelona is that they physically feel like they can't get around, from what I understand from talking to locals. So what does this mean? If and when you can, I highly recommend taking public transportation. I think you also get like a much better local experience when you do this, but it obviously helps with congestion on the roads, and it helps with pollution in the city. I would also say avoid big sites at peak hours if you can. It can be a total, complete zoo. It's not going to be fun, but also it means that locals can't really enjoy the sites, because they interact with and live with these places as well. And they deal with these mobs all the time. So if you can help be part of a group that's thinking about when to go and trying to go in off-peak hours so that you're not making the mobs there even bigger, that would be great. Also, I've heard locals complain about the fact that tourists are just kind of like standing around all the time in the way. And compared to the US, this part of the world is not, like an in a rush place most of the time. But people still want to be able to walk on their sidewalks, on their pavements. And so I would just try to be cognizant of what you're doing. If you're taking a picture or you're going to take a bunch of pictures, is there a place you can get off to the side a little bit? If you're looking up directions, same thing, find a shady spot, not in the main thoroughfare, and pull out your Google Maps, right? Don't just kind of like stand in a clump in the middle of the sidewalk. I think honestly, with all kinds of travel that you can do, right? A big part of it is giving back. So you're giving back to the local economy, hopefully, especially if you're spending your money in a really thoughtful way. But you're also giving back in that hopefully you are giving the locals a positive experience of your country. And if you're American, we need great ambassadors for our country right now more than ever. So I always love when I see people from the US who are here and they're trying to be really respectful of locals. And I am very aware that if you have watched this video, especially if you've made it to the end of the video, I'm probably preaching to the choir. You're probably someone who takes a really considered approach to when you travel abroad. You are trying to really be respectful, trying to make the best impression you can on the local population and really look at what's going on around you and follow local norms and maybe even learn from something, that they're doing differently and really appreciate their culture. So if you're one of those people, just feel free to use all these tips for your parents when they plan to come. see if you can sprinkle some of these into their subconscious, and maybe they'll use some of these as well. And if you have any kind of general tips for traveling or specific tips for being a good visitor to Barcelona, please, please, please drop them down below. I'm still looking for ways to be a much better non-local myself.